My white coat had become a shroud, not the pristine armor of a healer, but the final fragile shield between my existence and absolute obliteration. The courtroom stretched before me like an execution chamber. Then Landon entered, and the woman clutching his hand sent lightning through my veins. Karen. My friend. The one who'd stood beside me when we christened our medical center with champagne and dreams. Now she clung to my husband beneath the predatory flash of cameras, their intimacy a knife twisting in my chest. His chin lifted with the arrogance of a conqueror delivering a death sentence. Every single thing becomes mine. The house. The center. Your precious reputation. All you'll keep is a name no one will trust. The silver USB drive whispered against the table as I slid it forward. My voice emerged surgical, precise, cold, lethal. You've made a fatal miscalculation, Landon. Today I'm the surgeon. And you're already bleeding out on my table. The morning air hummed with machinery, that rhythmic pulse I'd once mistaken for this building's lifeblood. Perched in my third-floor sanctuary, I stared at the monitor's accusatory glow, watching crimson warnings explode across expense reports. Miami conference charges, cutting-edge surgical equipment, expedited delivery fees, every line item pristine, too immaculate, too orchestrated, too perfect to be anything but fabricated. My eyes dragged to the signature field. Bellamy Reed, each stroke razor-sharp, methodically precise, terrifyingly cold. The problem? Those weren't my signatures. I'd never touched those documents. The door whispered open. Landon materialized, his white shirt rumpled with calculated casualness, tie loosened like he'd just saved a life. His smile, the same one that soothed dying patients, now suffocated me like plastic wrap. Still here? It's nearly 8. My gaze remained locked on the damning numbers. I was leaving. Then these numbers started screaming. He invaded my space, positioned himself behind me. Sandalwood cologne collided with the antiseptic tang haunting the corridor. He glanced at my screen, then released a patronizing chuckle. Money obsession again, Bellamy? I've told you, some truths aren't meant for your understanding. This is our center, Landon. When something's rotting, I have every right to— No, his eyes transformed. That gentle facade cracked, revealing ice beneath. Rotting? What poison are you imagining? Expenses lacking source documentation? A Miami conference no physician remembers attending? Medical equipment contracts with companies that materialized last month like ghosts? Silence detonated between us. Instead of answering, Landon leaned down, placed his hand over my keyboard like a prison bar, and shut my laptop with finality. Focus on your patients, Belle. That's where your talent lives. The way he weaponized my name, Belle, once spoken with tenderness over kitchen table dinners, now dripped with honeyed menace. Sweet control wrapped around iron bars. And this center's future? The center remains ours, he said, strolling toward the exit, hands buried in pockets with disturbing nonchalance. We simply inhabit different roles. You rescue the dying. I prevent the ship from drowning. The door clicked shut, abandoning me with Rain's accusatory percussion against glass. I couldn't pinpoint when my trust had mutated into this gnawing suspicion. Perhaps when he started padlocking financial meetings for security protocol. Or when Karen, my college confidant, the friend I'd championed for employment, emerged as our new financial consultant. Karen wielded gentleness like a weapon. Those azure eyes radiated manufactured warmth. She conquered everyone, delivering sunrise coffee to receptionists, memorizing every doctor's birthday, even helping me select Landon's birthday gift last year. But since her arrival, Landon had transformed. More meetings with her, later homecomings. And whenever her name crossed my lips, his smile turned cautious. Guarded. Guilty, I attempted to bury my doubts. For our marriage, our reputation, the empire we'd constructed from nothing. But ignoring the cracks only amplified them into earthquakes. The hastily deleted messages, the miniature lies about urgent meetings, Karen's eyes fleeing mine whenever I posed innocent questions. One Friday night, I emerged from surgery late. Hallway lights carved cold reflections across linoleum. Passing Landon's office, laughter pierced the silence, familiar, yet now belonging to someone else. The door gaped slightly. Through that sliver, I witnessed them standing dangerously close, far beyond professional boundaries. Karen's voice descended to conspiracy. She's beginning to suspect. Landon's response came soft, calculated. Perfect. When she finally shatters, everyone will believe she's unfit to lead this place. I stumbled backward, heart detonating. Reality tilted sideways, all sound melting into a shrieking blur. I don't remember fleeing the building. When I reached home, my shoes were caked with mud like I'd walked through a grave. Dawn broke, and I arrived early, reopening the accounting files with trembling determination. Each number, every line item, each forged signature assembled a crystal-clear portrait. Money funneling through phantom nonprofits, rerouted to an account under HelioVantage, and at every chain's end, my name, authorizing each transfer. My signature weaponized against me. I printed everything, concealing documents inside a patient file. Fear and fury became twins, making my hands quake. Then my phone erupted. Unknown caller. A voice emerged, rough, masculine, threatening. Stop digging. What you discovered today, forget it existed. Who are you? Someone who used to work there. In this game, curiosity kills first. Every single time. The line died. Screen blackened. I stood paralyzed, heart racing toward cardiac arrest. In the mirror, my reflection accused me, a woman clinging to truth inside a web of lies. I understood with brutal clarity. Stopping meant safety, but also meant permanent imprisonment in darkness others had constructed. That night, I walked beneath mist-drenched trees. Streetlights shimmered on wet pavement, sharp as surgical blades. Opening my front door, Landon's cologne saturated the air, sandalwood and mint, his signature blend. But he was absent. Instead, an envelope waited on the dining table. No name, no seal. Inside, one printed line. Dr. Reed, thank you for your cooperation. Everything becomes easier if you choose silence. That evening, inserting my key produced a stiff, unfamiliar resistance. I tried again. Twice. 3 times. Nothing. The lock had been changed. I knocked. Silence answered. Light spilled through curtains, warm, soft, cruelly familiar. The same illumination I'd ignited nightly, waiting for Landon's return. The door opened. Karen stood there. Landon's white shirt draped her body loosely, hem brushing her thighs, sleeves precisely rolled. His cologne clung to her like a victory flag. She smiled, pure, undiluted triumph. Oh, Bellamy, you didn't actually believe your key would still function, did you? Landon materialized behind her, wineglass in hand. Living room light framed his serene face, everything unfolding according to his master plan. This house belongs to me now, he announced, tone disturbingly peaceful. And you're a terminated employee. I laughed, sharp, bitter. Did you forget whose name decorates that contract, Landon? He shrugged with theatrical indifference. My lawyer will enlighten you. The door slammed in my face. I turned away. The desolate street reflected lights on rainwater, my silhouette small, adrift in darkness. My phone vibrated. Notifications detonated. Bank account frozen for investigation. Another message materialized. Local media reporting Dr. Bellamy Reed accused of professional misconduct at Eugene Medical Center. Minutes. I'd lost everything in minutes. My home, my name, my work. The man I'd believed was my shelter. That night, I drove aimlessly through streets I'd once known by heart, where Landon and I had walked hand in hand after shifts. Streetlights blurred across the windshield, smearing into broken light streaks like my disintegrating memories. Perhaps everything had started crumbling long ago, and I'd been too consumed saving others to notice I'd forgotten to save myself. The car door slammed, echoing through darkness. I stepped out, staring at black water ahead. Wind sliced through my hair, sharp enough to pierce my skull. When tears have been absent too long, only emptiness remains. My phone rang. Bellamy, it's May. Her voice emerged firm, familiar, a rope pulling me from drowning. May, our former in-house attorney. Someone I'd always trusted. I saw the news. Are you surviving? Just got expelled from my own house. So, thriving. Landon's been orchestrating this for months. He filed a complaint with the medical board, accusing you of improper anesthesia procedures in recent surgery. They've suspended your medical license pending investigation. If Landon fabricated this, evidence exists. I still have internal report copies, and I know what he's been doing with accounting. A spark ignited inside me. May, help me. Help you? I already started. I found refuge in a small motel on the city's outskirts where passing cars weren't loud enough to make me flinch. Each morning, I prepared coffee with trembling hands, trying to convince myself this was merely a prolonged nightmare. But reality dispatched its reminders, an email from the Oregon Medical Board summoning me. Another headline, from life-saving doctor to suspect under investigation. My name had become a tool for others to twist and drag through mud. Behind the entire campaign stood Landon, the man who knew I wouldn't fight with words because I believed in proof. The following days, I existed like a shadow. Every step measured. Every phone call double-checked. Social media swarmed with venomous comments. Anesthesiologist or troublemaker? Made me laugh until numbness consumed me. May met me at a small cafe near Oak Avenue. Gray coat, thin frame, exhausted face, but steady eyes. I found this in the old secure archive, she said, sliding an envelope across the table. Internal audit report from last year. At least 3 major transactions with forged versions of your signature. I opened the file. Numbers flooded the pages, each ending with my name in the approval field. This is the proof, I whispered. It's the key, May nodded. But we'll need more to destroy him. Does Landon have backing? Yes. A major medical investment fund in California. I met one representative once. Karen was their connection. They're using the center as a front to cycle aid money. So they used my name for money laundering. Exactly. And Landon's just the middleman. May's tone grew grave. You must be careful. If they discover you're digging, they won't just take your reputation. I've already lost everything, May. There's nothing left to steal. Perhaps when people hit bottom, fear evaporates. And that's the only moment they're truly free. I left the cafe, envelope tucked in my coat. Through the fogged window, I noticed a black car parked at the corner. Unfamiliar license plate. When I turned onto the narrow road toward the motel, the car followed. At the intersection, I stopped, pretending to take a call. The car stopped too, headlights extinguished. I walked faster, chill racing down my spine. Nobody knew my location except May, but if Landon suspected, he'd find methods. The medical center still blazed past 10 p.m. Hallway glow cast ghostly reflections on the glass facade, showing me a stranger standing in that soulless light. I headed straight to the 3rd floor, my former office. The door gaped open, but the nameplate Dr. Bellamy Reed had been removed, leaving 2 tiny screw holes. A small gap, but heavier than any threat. My computer remained on the desk, screen locked. I typed the usual password. No response. Second attempt. Third. A message appeared. Account disabled by administrator. Landon Graves. My hand trembled searching drawers. Papers, drafts, handwritten notes remained, but nothing useful. Opening the last drawer, I discovered a gray envelope tucked in the corner. No name, no markings. Inside, a single sheet with handwritten blue ink. Find the February 4th contract. Old finance office. Someone knew I'd return. Someone was watching. The old finance office inhabited the 2nd floor, long since relocated. Corridor lights dimmed, each footstep echoing like metal against walls. I used the master key I'd kept since my medical director days. Fortunately, the lock remained unchanged. Inside, dust-shrouded desks, stale paper scent mingling with rusted pipes. I activated the corner computer, fingers shaking as the screen slowly awakened. Under financial reports, I found a password-protected folder. I tried usual numbers. Wedding date, hospital code, founding date. All wrong. Then I remembered when Landon secured the first investment from the California fund. He'd opened champagne, joking, From now on, this day is my second birthday. I typed that date. The screen unlocked. Among files, one line seized my attention. Contract 402. A transfer record materialized. $1.8 million from the center's account to Helio Vantage Solutions. The signature at bottom was mine. Perfectly forged. So flawless I had to stare 3 times before noticing the flaw. The handwriting was too clean, too precise, like someone trained to imitate. I printed a copy, slipping it into my bag. Turning off the monitor, my reflection stared back. Pale face, hollow eyes, an expression I barely recognized. The door clicked. I froze. Who's there? I stepped toward the doorway. The hallway was empty. When I turned back, a small paper lay on the desk where nothing had existed before. I fled the building immediately, walking quickly through the empty parking lot. Opening my car door, I tossed the file on the passenger seat, hand never leaving the bag holding the contract. As the engine ignited, my phone rang. Unknown number. Who is this? You found the contract, didn't you? Who are you? Someone who doesn't want to see you destroyed. But you need to listen carefully. They're watching you. They? Who are, you know better than I do. Helio Vantage isn't just a shell company. It's the arm of a California investment fund. And Landon is merely the face. Why should I believe you? Because if you don't, you won't have another chance to choose. The call ended. Screen went blank. No saved number. Outside, a black car rolled quietly from the lot, red taillights slicing through wet pavement like blood. I sat in the car, breathing heavily. Landon's words echoed, "I keep the ship from sinking." Now I understood. To keep the ship afloat, he was willing to throw me overboard. I extracted the contract, studying the forged signature. Beneath it, an 8-character transfer code I'd never encountered. But in the internal system, every transaction had a pattern, a final approver. If I could regain access to original files, I could trace the money's path. I opened my personal laptop, connecting through the secure network May had established. In the old database under administrator access appeared the top-level user list, Landon, Karen, and one name I hadn't expected, Eleanor Marsh, Chief Financial Officer of the California Investment Fund. I searched her name online. Results materialized. Eleanor had once faced charges for misusing medical aid funds to transfer money overseas. The verdict was read on a brilliant June morning. Sunlight streamed through courtroom windows, falling across Landon's face, making him squint, not from glare, but because for the first time in his life, he had nothing left to conceal. When the judge pronounced the final words, 18 years in, prison for financial fraud and money laundering, or gavel struck with a deep thud, echoing through my chest like a slowing heartbeat. The room fell silent. May squeezed my hand gently. I nodded, wordless. Landon turned back, eyes locking on mine. Amid murmurs and shuffling shoes, that look lasted only seconds, but I understood. Not regret, not pain. Hatred, the only emotion remaining. As officers led him away, yellow light stretched his shadow long across cold tile. I watched until the door closed. Strangely, I felt no victory, no relief. Only a hollow space inside me, as if during that long operation I'd cut out a piece of my own heart without realizing it. In the months that followed, the medical center was returned to me. The press called it a justice symbol. They photographed me smiling before the sign, Eugene Medical Center. But the truth was, inside me, no laughter remained. The day I received the keys, I stood in the main lobby once filled with laughter, footsteps, voices calling patient names. Now the only sound was wind sweeping through the long hallway, carrying antiseptic scent mixed with memory. I walked through each room, touching walls, desks, the swivel chair still bearing the scratch from when Landon once yanked it in anger. Everything occupied its place, but none of it felt alive. May came that afternoon as sun tilted toward the western wing. "Will you continue?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, this center needs rebuilding from the ground up. I can't remain in a place stained by my own hands." May stayed silent momentarily, then softly asked, "Then what will you do?" I gazed out the window where cherry trees along the street had begun shedding leaves. There's something else I want to do. Not healing bodies, but healing those who've lost their faith. I'll start a free medical fund for women who've been financially abused. Women transformed into debtors by the people they loved. May looked at me for a long time, then smiled. A rare smile without any caution trace. You know, Bellamy, I think this is the first time I've seen you truly living. My voice was quiet but steady. Perhaps it's the first time I'm not afraid. Months later, the Haven Fund was born, a small clinic on the city's outskirts. No grand sign, no media, just ordinary hands. I no longer wore a white coat, only simple shirts and the old silver bracelet my father once gave me. Patients came. None knew who I used to be, and I didn't need them to. They only needed healing. One morning, while sorting files, a young woman entered holding a boy around 6 years old. Her eyes were dark from exhaustion, voice trembling as she explained her husband had hidden all hospital money, leaving her in debt. I looked at her and saw myself from years ago. I sat beside her, took her hand, and said slowly, "It's going to be okay. We'll start again from the beginning." Those were the same words I'd once told myself in the mirror on a night when no one believed me. Now, saying them again, I realized some wounds only heal when you use them to heal others. I thought after everything, the past would finally rest. But the past never sleeps. It only waits for you to forget. A small parcel waited on my desk. No sender. Inside a velvet box. My wedding ring catching lamplight. A thin circle of silver fire. Beneath it, a folded note. Karen isn't dead. Be careful. What you believe is over. The room cooled. Outside, wind combed the trees. Nothing ends. It only changes direction. I closed the box and breathed once, steady. If the storm returns, I'll be the one holding the scalpel of truth. I leaned back in my chair, feeling as if I'd opened a door to a pit. Everything was taking shape, which also meant I was standing in a chess game where one wrong move could erase me from the board. The car window fogged with moisture. I traced a line on glass with my finger, watching streetlights blur into soft golden halos. A message appeared on my phone screen. Don't go back to the center. Someone knows you took the files. I stared at the words, gripping the phone tight. M. It had to be May. Outside, wind picked up again, carrying the distant rumble of a storm. I placed my hand on the contract, feeling cold paper against my skin. I didn't know who was helping me, who was threatening me, or who was using me as bait. But one thing was certain. If Landon believed I would stay silent, he forgot I wasn't born to endure. I turned on the headlights. The beams cut through wet night. In the distance, someone stood leaning against a lamppost, tall, wearing a dark coat, face hidden. I stared, heart pounding, then pressed the gas and drove away. In the rearview mirror, the blurred light flickered, and for a split second, I saw that person turn and watch me leave. I knew then. The quiet war had only begun. That night, the city lay under a thin veil of fog, streetlights flickering like faint sparks about to fade. I sat in my small rented room, the thick folder I'd printed from the old system open before me. The numbers seemed to move on the page, and I felt that if I stared any longer, they'd transform into ropes tightening around my throat. The phone buzzed, an unfamiliar number, no name, no area code. I let it ring several times, then answered. A man's voice spoke low and hoarse, but each word clear and deliberate. "Dr. Bellamy Reed. Who is this?" "Someone who knows how to save you. But if you take one wrong step, we'll both be buried." "What are you talking about?" "Helio Vantage. And the signatures you never signed." The room suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. I stood looking out the window. The fog was so thick even the streetlight across the road was a blur. "Who are you?" "Jonas Firth. I was the auditor at the center before Karen conveniently got me fired." The name sparked something in my memory. Jonas, the quiet man who always sat in the corner during meetings. Thin glasses. Precise notes. I remembered him because once during a board presentation, he'd looked at me for a long moment while Landon discussed a new investment plan. "Why should I trust you?" I asked, my voice raspier than expected. "Because no one else can show you what I'm about to," Jonas spoke again. "The lantern bar by the river. 10 South to PM, come alone. Don't bring your main phone." When the clock struck 10, I pushed open the door to the lantern. The bar sat by the riverbank, its dim yellow light glowing through misted glass. The air smelled of old whiskey and burnt wood, a scent both warm and lonely. A man sat at the corner table back to the river. The dim light revealed only the edge of his face and the glint of thin silver frames. "You're on time," he said calmly as I sat down. I studied him briefly. Around 40, gray shirt, sleeves neatly rolled. He didn't look like a man on the run or someone desperate, but there was something in his eyes, darkness mixed with the weariness of someone who'd seen too much truth to speak it. Jonas pulled a thin envelope from his leather briefcase and placed it on the table. "These are the transaction records between the Center and Helio Vantage. I copied them before I was fired." I opened the envelope. Rows of numbers lined the pages like a financial labyrinth. On the 12th line, I saw my name, authorized by Dr. Bellamy Reed, code 7R. "How did you get this?" "At the cost of a career," Jonas said slowly. "And maybe my life if they discover I still have the original." "Why help me?" "Because no one deserves to be destroyed for loving the wrong person." I was about to ask more, but Jonas raised his hand slightly. He tilted his head and whispered, "Don't turn around. 2 men at the table behind you. One works for Karen. They're watching us. What should I do?" "Take this," Jonas murmured. "There's a USB inside the envelope. Open it somewhere untraceable. Will you testify?" "To testify for you would be signing my own death warrant. I can only help you this far." Jonas leaned in, voice barely audible. "If you truly want to survive, remember this. Landon wasn't the last link in this chain. And Karen wasn't his lover. He left without looking back." I listened to his footsteps fading into the rain. Behind me, a chair scraped. One of the men stood, pretending to pay, but his eyes flicked quickly toward me. I slipped the USB into my coat pocket and exited through the back door, heading straight for the river. A black car slowed nearby, stopping a few yards away. The window lowered and I saw the face inside. Karen. The car didn't linger. It rolled away, but in that instant, I knew the most important thing. She knew I had met Jonas. I returned to my room close to midnight. The hallway lights flickered weakly, bulbs threatening to die. I locked the door twice, then set the USB on the table. My fingers trembled as I plugged it in. The screen displayed a single folder. Helio Records. Inside were dozens of files. Transactions, transfers, donor list. Names appeared. Doctors, donors, even a state senator. I held my breath, gripping the USB tightly. A shadow moved under the door's narrow strip of light. A few seconds later, footsteps faded away. The next morning, May came to my office earlier than usual. She brought 2 cups of coffee, her face calm, almost too calm. But as she sat one down, I noticed her fingers trembling slightly and her eyes avoiding mine. "What is it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. May pulled a file from her coat pocket, neatly clipped inside a transparent folder. "I think you should see this." Between the pages was a copy of an old investigation file stamped by the California State Financial Bureau. In the center, the name Karen Voss stood out like blood on white paper. I flipped through a few pages. One note read, "Suspected of involvement in a money laundering network through international medical aid projects. Case closed due to lack of evidence. Files sealed at the request of the district attorney's office." "Where did you get this?" "An old contact at the Finance Bureau owes me a favor. But you know, Bellamy, not everyone can erase a record this cleanly." "You mean someone in the government is backing Karen? I'm afraid they're the ones pulling the strings." Outside, morning fog covered the neighborhood, rooftops fading together like an illusion. I no longer knew where I stood. In the world of healers or in a chess game played by people who knew how to kill without firing a shot. May stepped closer, gently resting a hand on my shoulder. They don't know you have these files yet, but time isn't on your side. I turned to her. Do you trust Jonas? Not completely, but he's the link we need. If he once worked for Karen, he knows how to trace the money backward. A soft ding sounded from the phone on my desk. I walked over. A new message from an anonymous number. Someone just accessed Heliovantage's financial records at 7:12 a.m. The trace came from inside Oregon State Bank. In the world of manipulators, when someone starts digging through files, it means a betrayal is already in motion. By noon, another message arrived, this time from Jonas. No phone calls. Karen's breaking down. Landon suspects her. And I think she's truly afraid. A strange feeling emerged, a sharp thrill seeing the one who once crushed me finally tremble. But right after came the dread. When a beast is cornered, it lashes out blindly. And I knew Karen would never die quietly. That afternoon, I met May at the cafe by the river. May was already there, eyes fixed on her tablet. Any updates? I asked, taking a seat. Yes, and you won't like them. She slid the tablet toward me. On the screen was a new transaction sheet. 3 transfers, each over $200,000, completed in just 4 days. Sender, Landon Graves. Recipient, K. Voss. Next to it, the description read, refund for consultancy services. So Landon's still paying Karen even knowing she's under suspicion, or he's buying her silence, May said. But the issue isn't the money. I traced the fund source, and these transfers didn't come from Landon's personal account. What do you mean? May zoomed in on the statement. The account number appeared, one I recognized instantly. That's the reserve account of the center. The one I used to receive government medical aid. The sound of my own voice came out dry. They're using state funds to bribe each other. And the one who approved the transfers is still you, according to the system. I closed my eyes for a few seconds, then opened them. My voice low. They're setting me up as an international money launderer. That evening, Jonas called. Karen's losing control. What did she say? That Landon knows about the original contract. And she thinks I'm the one who took it. Where are you? On South Bank Bridge. But don't come. They're watching me. Bellamy, if I disappear, find a woman named Eleanor Marsh. She's the key. Everything started with her. I tried to ask more, but the call ended abruptly. The dead tone echoed in my ear, cold as if someone else had cut the line. That night, I reopened Karen's file page by page. Among the contract copies, one small detail caught my eye. Every document signed by Karen shared the same date, February 4th. That was also the date on the forged contract with my signature. I turned to the last page, staring at the neat, precise signature. In that moment, I knew someone was controlling both Landon and Karen like puppets. Rain pounded against the windows, sounding like a heart out of rhythm. When the knocking came, I thought I imagined it, but then 3 more knocks followed, urgent, frantic. Who's there? I stepped closer, hand gripping the doorknob. A trembling voice came through, breaking under the rain. Bellamy, it's me, Karen. Please open the door. I wasn't going to. Every instinct screamed, don't. It could be a trap. But her voice, thin, cracked, desperate, sounded like someone clinging to their last breath. I unlocked the door. Karen stood there, hair soaked, face pale, mascara streaked down her cheeks. Her white blouse clung to her body, hands clasped tightly as if holding herself together. He's going to kill me, she whispered, almost collapsing. I caught her, shut the door, pulled her inside. Karen gasped for breath like someone who had escaped hell. Who? I asked, my voice rough. Landon. He knows everything. Knows I kept a copy of the contract. Knows I sent money off the books. He said, if I don't disappear, he'll do it for me. Why come to me after everything you did? Because I have no one else. He wants to shut me down. But if I die, at least you need to know, he's not working alone. I handed her a towel. You know I have no reason to believe you, right? I know, you don't have to believe me. Just listen. I sat down across from her, started the recorder on my phone, screen face down. Talk. Karen pulled a small black USB drive from her coat and placed it on the table. This is a copy of Helio Vantage's transfer data. Landon said if I helped him erase it, he'd let me go. But after I did, he changed his mind. He said I was the last person who knew Eleanor Marsh's secret, and that no witness could be left alive. What secret? I asked, eyes locked on her. Eleanor created Helio Vantage. Landon's just the puppet. Every dollar laundered through medical projects passed through her hands, then returned disguised as international aid. And us, the medical center, we were the legal front. A chill crawled down my spine. How long have you known? Since before you married Landon. So you came into my life to pave the way for him. Her gaze dropped to the floor. She looked up, her voice breaking. I thought I was smart enough to control everything, but he was always one step ahead. By the time I realized it, I was another pawn. Bellamy, I'm not here for forgiveness. I want you to know, it's almost over. He won't stop. If I disappear, believe that it was him. What will you do now? Run if I still can. But I think he already knows where I am. She picked up her coat, walking to the door. I moved to stop her, but Karen smiled faintly, almost dissolving into the dark. Thank you for listening, Bellamy. You don't have to believe me. Just don't let him rewrite this story his way. The door closed. I saved the audio file and set the USB on the table. Outside, thunder rolled and wind hissed through the window frame. I had a feeling this night would not be ordinary. The next morning, the news broke. A silver sedan was found floating in the Willamette River early today. License plate registered to Karen Voss, former financial consultant at Eugene Medical Center. No body recovered. I dropped my coffee cup to the floor. My phone vibrated. A new message, no name. No number. Don't do anything reckless. You're the only one left who knows. And Landon knows that too. I looked at the black USB on the table, the last remaining piece of evidence, and understood that from this moment, every line between life and death, truth and deceit had become terrifyingly thin. Because if Karen had told the truth, the next person Landon needed to shut down was me. The morning of the trial arrived strangely clear, but to me, it was blinding. I stepped out of the car, heels clicking evenly on wet pavement. It didn't feel like walking into surgery, though the logic was identical. Knowing there would be blood, but keeping your hands steady. The county courthouse was packed. Cameras, reporters, whispers buzzing like a hive. I didn't look at them. May walked beside me, holding a thick file, her pace slow but firm. You all right? She asked quietly. Without turning, I replied. If this is the final battlefield, I'll walk in as myself, no longer the victim. The courtroom doors opened, releasing the scent of polished wood and ink. Across the aisle, Landon was already seated. Crisp shirt, silver gray tie, every inch composed. Looking at him, no one would believe he was the man who built a money-laundering empire and drove others to their deaths. His eyes met mine. He smiled slowly, the smile of a man who believed he'd already won. I sat down. The cold of the wooden table seeped into my palms. May placed her hand gently on my shoulder, a small touch, enough to remind me why we were here. The hearing began. The judge's gavel struck sharply. Today, the court continues proceedings in the case of Mr. Landon Graves versus Mrs. Bellamy. Read regarding ownership of Eugene Medical Center and related financial allegations. Landon's lawyer, a gray-haired man, stood first. Your Honor, he began confidently. My client is not a criminal. He acted to protect the center from his wife's emotional mismanagement and unstable financial decisions. I listened without expression. Landon's cologne lingered faintly in the air. The scent that once followed me for years now made me nauseous. We have evidence, the lawyer continued, that Mrs. Reed misused medical funds and committed severe administrative violations. Cameras clicked. Landon turned toward me, his eyes smug, as if inviting me to watch his performance. May rose. Your Honor, my client has evidence to refute those claims and, more importantly, a direct confession from someone involved. She took a USB from her bag and handed it to the court technician. On the large screen, an image flickered to life. Karen's face, blurred by my room's dim light that night, her voice trembling. "He's going to kill me. Landon is using the evidence I created to destroy me." I looked at Landon. He still wore that smile, but his fingers were tapping lightly on the table, an old habit that meant he was calculating. Suddenly, the screen flickered. The video froze. The audio cracked, then went completely dark. May frowned. "Technician, what's happening?" The technician fumbled, shaking his head. "The file's corrupted. The rest can't be read," noise rippled through the courtroom. A few reporters raised their cameras, flashes bursting in quick succession. The judge struck the gavel, calling for order. Landon leaned back, chuckling softly, just enough for me to hear. "You're always one step late, Bellamy." I turned to May. She was composed, but I could see the muscle in her jaw tighten. Taking a slow breath, she said, "The copy is damaged, but we have another piece of evidence." I understood the signal. My hand brushed the silver USB drive in my jacket pocket, the one I'd carried like a survival charm. "Your Honor, I have supplementary recording." I stepped to the evidence table and inserted the USB into the computer. The screen lit up. This time, not a confession, but security footage from the medical center. The image opened on the accounting office. The cold glow of fluorescent light made everything look harsher. In the center stood Landon, white shirt, hands in pockets, speaking to two accountants. His voice came through, low but clear. "Transfer the funds to Helio Vantage. No need for verification. I'll use Bellamy's signature." One of the men in the video hesitated. "But sir, that would be money laundering." "I didn't hire you to teach me the law," Landon cut in, tone flat. "Just do it. And if anyone asks, say it was her order." On the screen, Karen entered, tense, voice lowered. "Are you sure? If this comes out, she'll actually be investigated." "That's the point," Landon replied, stepping closer. His words quiet but caught by the camera. "If you ever mention the original contract again, I'll make sure your car ends up in the river." I lifted my head, eyes locked on Landon. He went pale for a few seconds before regaining his composure, though the slight tremor in his fingers betrayed his panic. The judge turned toward him, voice heavy. "Mr. Graves, do you have anything to say?" I heard the sound of a pen dropping, someone's quiet cough. Landon swallowed hard, forcing a strained smile. "It's doctored. She could have paid someone to fake it. This video isn't admissible. The data carries the internal system's timestamp authentication," May replied, her tone sharp as a blade. "Any modification leaves a trace code, and this recording's origin code shows it was captured on February 4th, the exact date of the falsified transfer contract." Landon gripped the chair's armrest. Murmurs filled the room as reporters scribbled furiously. The judge called a recess to review the evidence. I returned to my seat. May sat beside me and whispered, "You did the right thing." "No, May," I said quietly. "I just did what he never thought I'd dare to do." Across the room, Landon lowered his head, his knuckles whitening as he clenched his fists. The courtroom light fell across his face, revealing a twisted smile, half arrogance, half despair. The man who once held my entire life in his hands was now left with fear, a fear that reached his bones, the kind that comes when he finally realized for the first time I was the one holding the scalpel. Landon was led away between two officers. His white shirt wrinkled. "I ask you?" The arrogance once carved into his face now dissolved, leaving only exhaustion and bitterness. Everything happened fast. Flashes erupted. Reporters' voices buzzed like waves. I saw Landon's lips move as he looked back at me, but I couldn't hear the words. Maybe it was a threat. Or maybe for once it was the truth. May stood beside me, her face pale. As the courtroom doors closed, she turned toward me, voice trembling, though not entirely from emotion. "Belle, there's something you don't know." Before I could respond, she set her hand on the table as if steadying herself to keep from collapsing. That USB, it wasn't from Karen or Jonas. It was from me. The words froze me. I stared at May, half expecting it to be the nervous rambling of someone under pressure. But no, there was no hesitation in her eyes. What did you say? May gave a faint, bitter smile, her tone low, more to herself than to me. I was the one who recovered that data. I sent the anonymous envelope to your office. I hacked the system to extract the security footage. The air in the room turned heavy. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock. I didn't know whether to be angry or grateful. All I knew was that something vast and conflicted was rising inside me. Doubt, pain, and a terrifying kind of relief. Why? Because I owed you, Bellamy, but not the way you think. She paused, voice unsteady. 10 years ago, I loved Landon. Back then, he had nothing, just ambition and that polished charm everyone fell for. I thought he was someone I could build a life with. I didn't realize I was one of his early experiments, testing how easily people could be controlled. She stopped, smiling faintly, a thin smile that barely covered an old wound. I worked for the auditing firm that partnered with his investment fund. One day, he came to me, asked me to delete some sensitive data. When I hesitated, he kissed me and said he needed time to complete a legitimate project. I believed him, and months later I was fired for technical misconduct, and he, she added quietly, got his funding to open the medical center with you. Silence stretched between us. Then May slowly took a memory card from her pocket and placed it on the table. I kept everything, the emails, the transactions, the recorded calls between him and Eleanor Marsh. When you were accused, I realized history was repeating itself. I didn't save you for justice. I saved you because I was once you, someone who believed love could heal a sick man. Outside, clouds were gathering. A cold wind slipped through the doorway, scattering papers across the hearing table. The sound of rustling sheets felt like the breath of the past wrapping around my throat. Did you know it would end like this? She nodded faintly. I knew one day he'd pay. I didn't think it would be by my hand. In my mind, I saw Landon with his head bowed, wrists cuffed, Karen vanishing into the rain. And now May, the woman who had stood quietly behind me all along, revealed as the silent witness to it all. May, you can walk away. Forget everything. No one has to know you were involved. She gave a sad, defiant smile. You think I have anywhere left to go? I lost my career, my reputation, and my youth because of him? I'm not afraid anymore. There's one more thing, she said, her voice deepening. When I restored the data, I found another encrypted file. I couldn't decode it, but I'm certain it doesn't belong to Landon. Doesn't belong to Landon? May met my eyes, her look deliberate. It belongs to Eleanor, and I'm afraid this isn't over, Bellamy. You've only touched the tip of the iceberg. I had once thought everything would end when Landon was cuffed. But now, hearing May's words, I understood. Justice doesn't come from the court. It comes from those who dare to drag light into the darkest places. Thank you for not letting me drown in his story. She smiled faintly, her eyes wet, but glowing with something rare. Not joy, but release. No, Belle, you don't understand. You're the one who saved me by surviving. A car horn blared outside, snapping us back to reality. May stood, put on her coat, and walked slowly toward the door. As her hand touched the knob, I called out, May, what will you do now? She turned, her smile tilted, sad but proud. I'm going to find Eleanor Marsh. I want to know why women like us always end up paying for someone else's sins. The door closed softly. I stared at the empty space before me, feeling everything settle into silence. Only the steady ticking of the clock remained, reminding me that even when the illusion shatters, the story isn't over yet. I stepped out of the courthouse into a windless May morning, pale sunlight slanting across the gray stone steps. Most people had already left. Only a few reporters lingered, hoping for their last photos. I said nothing, just nodded at May and walked toward the car parked by the curb. 18 years. That was the sentence the judge had given Landon. 18 years sounded long, but in my head, one thought kept repeating. He had already stolen 10 from me before that. When the car door shut, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror, a face no longer belonging to the woman who'd been forced out of her home on a rainy night years ago. But I wasn't the same person either. A part of me had been drained by this war. What remained was learning how to exist again. May sat in the driver's seat, took off her glasses, and turned to me. "Will you go back to the center?" I shook my head, my voice hoarse after days of tension. "I don't think I can trust it anymore. The center can be rebuilt, but what it hid cannot," she nodded quietly. The car rolled slowly down the empty street. On both sides, the trees had sprouted pale green leaves, the scent of sap blending with the breeze. I leaned my head against the window, watching people move on with their lives while I somehow was still learning how to breathe again. A few weeks later, I officially resigned from the board. In the final meeting, I handed over management to a group of young doctors. No one said much, but their eyes carried a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. I smiled softly, signed the last paper, and stood. "Let this place return to what it was meant to be," I said. "A place for healing, not for hiding wounds." That afternoon, when I left the building, I didn't feel the weight anymore. I opened a small medical fund afterward in the suburbs, a place where women suffering from financial abuse could receive care without papers, without proof. All they needed was the will to live again. I named it the Haven Fund, after a former patient who once told me, "Dawn isn't a new beginning. It's enough light to see you haven't disappeared." On opening day, about 10 people came, mostly middle-aged women and a few young girls. One woman from another state kept her hands buried in the pockets of her torn coat. As she stepped inside, she whispered to me, "I heard the doctor here doesn't ask about the past." I smiled. "No one needs to explain why they want to live." She nodded, then broke down crying. I handed her a tissue, feeling as if I were looking at myself in a mirror from years ago. The months that followed were calmer than I had expected. May often stopped by, bringing coffee and newspapers with important headlines already marked. One morning, she set a paper on my desk, her voice low. "They say Landon's filing for an appeal," I only shrugged. "He can't stand being forgotten. He spent his whole life surviving through other people's eyes." May gave a faint smile and said nothing more. I knew she was tired too. We were both living on in a world that had already broken. The only difference was how each of us chose to stitch it back together. That evening, I stayed alone in the small office of the fund. The warm yellow light spilled over the desk, soft enough to dissolve into the air. I was reviewing a list of new patients when the receptionist knocked and handed me a small parcel. "For you, no sender listed." I took it. It was wrapped in plain brown paper, no postage stamps, only a slanted handwriting familiar enough to send a chill down my spine. To Bellamy. I sat down and opened it slowly. Inside was an old velvet box. When the lid lifted, I saw a faint glimmer, my wedding ring, the same one I had thrown into a drawer in despair years ago. Beneath the ring was a folded note, the handwriting rough but unmistakable. "Karen isn't dead. Be careful. What you believe is over." I sat frozen, holding the paper, hearing the loud thump of my own heartbeat. The room suddenly felt cold. Outside, wind hissed through the trees, carrying the faint clatter of metal from the porch, as if someone had passed by quietly. I set the ring on the desk, staring at it for a long time. The reflection from the silver band formed a small circle of light on the paper, like a spark spreading slowly. "Karen isn't dead." The words echoed in my mind over and over, like a voice in a cave. If she was alive, why send this to me? A threat, a warning, or an invitation into another spiral? I walked to the window. The city outside was still glowing, streets intertwining like the veins of a sleepless giant. I wondered how many people were living unaware that their lives were still being controlled by the past. Just like me, newly free, yet already feeling an invisible hand around my throat. In that moment, I understood. Nothing ever truly ends. Justice is only a pause, while truth, it lingers somewhere like a crack beneath healed skin, waiting for the day it splits open again. I turned back to the desk, looking at the ring. The lamplight reflected off the metal, forming a narrow halo around the handwritten words. I reached out, touching the surface. The cold ran through my fingertips. Everything should have been over. But I knew the moment I touched that ring, it all began again. Some wounds only seem healed. One memory is enough to make them bleed, and I still wonder, maybe what we call the end is just the beginning of another journey. Life doesn't always need revenge to balance the scales. Sometimes it only needs the courage to go on. If you've ever had to let go of someone to hold on to yourself, I hope this story helps you see the strength still living in your heart. Please follow and subscribe to hear more stories like this. And tell me, where are you watching from?